good afternoon, and welcome to Sense Making Conversations. My name is Andrea Sampson, and I'm going to be your host and guide today as we delve deeply into the issues that are impacting us all. The future. Can any of us imagine what our future is going to look like 10 years from now? We think about that. 10 years ago in 2010 or 2011, could any of us have imagined that we would be where we are today? Not at all. And from where we are today, looking forward to 2031, can we even fathom what it might look like? Because we're in a moment of massive transformation right now. The future, it might look a bit scary, or maybe it looks exciting. But what I do know is that all the structures that we trusted, our institutions, our healthcare, our education, our economic anchors, our government, our governance have been shaken. We're in a moment of upheaval. What was, well, that's in question, right? What will be is quite difficult to imagine. And what is, well, right in this red hot moment is really hard to define. For me, I look to those who are way smarter than me, who have created models to help me to understand what's happening. I look at the World Economic Forum, who have given us models as we enter into the fourth industrial revolution. I look to thinkers like Hardin Tibbs, who are my guest today introduced me to, who sees the future as a landscape for us to navigate. To creators and thinkers like Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, who showed us the exponential nature of the future path that we're on. These are models that help us to see the complex, the complicated, and the chaotic. I am so excited for today's conversation, where we're going to dive into these models. We're going to sense make, where we can see how to apply and make better decisions to reinvent our future. My guest today is Ozioma Egwuonwu. She's an internationally celebrated speaker, a strategist, a scholar, and a transformational thought leader. She's the founder and chief strategic transformation officer of BurnBright International and has spoken at the United Nations, at TEDx, at South by Southwest, at Web Summit, at Singularity University, and at top educational institutions such as Oxford University and Columbia University, where she was a member of their faculty. And today, she is faculty of Singularity University, Portugal. She's also a talk boutique speaker. In 2012, Ozioma founded World Dream Day, a celebration that happens on September 25th, and it's the first ever global holiday dedicated to activating ideas, goals, and dreams. In 2020, World Dream Day impacted over 7.4 million people. Ozioma has also appeared on NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, MSNBC, and contributed to the Huffington Post, Thrive Global, and the UN Magazine. In short, she's a visionary, she's a leader, and she offers unique pathways forward. I am so honored to have you with us today, Ozioma.
Oh, thank you, Angie. It's always a wonderful time to be with you. It's always a wonderful time to be talking about reinvention, to be talking about possibility. So I'm excited for us to just connect and to explore ideas together during this time.
Fantastic. So, there's so much that you work on, and we have so many places we could go. But I thought, well, I'm just going to throw you an easy question, because, why not, right? At the beginning. So, what the question that I have is, as you look out into this uncertain landscape right now, and the reality is humans are the ones that are making this path forward. So from your perspective, as a thinker, as a visionary, as somebody who follows so many smart people, what do you think humans are capable
Oh, wow. What a powerful question. What do I believe human beings are capable of? I believe we are capable of more than we even know,
of?
more than we could ever even imagine. In fact, we are capable of the impossible. And in fact, I believe that a lot of where, that tension that comes, that we feel very present in this day and age, is about the fact that we feel we are being called and invited to activate our full capacities in service of a greater possibility. So I believe that we human beings are capable of coming together in ways that are based off of true collaboration, based off of reinventing and transforming systems for the greater good. And what's amazing to me is that when you see human beings come together, I mean, there's one image that I love so much. It's actually not an image, it's a video. And it's a woman like pinned or stuck underneath a car. And all of a sudden, all these people are coming from every single direction. And they come together and they lift that car and they release the woman. Now, that to me is a reflection of what human beings are capable of. When we come together, we have the power to do almost anything. The challenge is that we actually are so often operating in silos and operating alone. But when we come together, we integrate, we connect in new ways. That to me is truly when we see a glimpse of what human beings are capable of.
That's a powerful image, right? A car on a person. And it's, a nightmare, of course. We can't imagine seeing that. And yet, it's an image that I think all of us have at some point in our lives been confronted with. We may not have had a car on top of us, but we have had the weight of some crushing thing on us and wondering, how are we going to get through it? How can we move into that next iteration of ourselves? Who will come and pull the car off of us? And that's a really big question, right? And I think here we are sitting, hopefully in the latter stages of a global pandemic. And that kind of feels like a car on our chest for many of us, right? So as we're starting to look forward, and I actually saw there's a great question actually from our panelists or from our audience around the pandemic itself. And I think it kind of, maybe I'll frame it in a couple of different ways. The question is the pandemic a portal? And if it is, where do we want to go? And I want to throw into that and go, if that's the case, because what a beautiful question, right? If that's the case, and thank you, Adel, for giving us that. I really appreciate it. If that's the case, what do we need to do? Or how do we need to think in order to go there? So I would love to hear your perspectives on that. Is the pandemic a portal? And what mindset might we need to take into that portal in order to transform and magically transform somewhere else?
Yes, I would say yes. I do believe that the pandemic is a portal. I know that there was a quote from I always trip over the name, but Roy Atadari.
Yeah, that's
Roy.
where it's from. Yeah.
Yes, from her famous quote, which my tongue always trips over her name, but she's amazing and brilliant, and I love her work. This notion of a portal and us going through a portal and entering in, not knowing what will meet us on the other side. And so I want to kind of like address that, who we are and how we think before we enter that portal, and then what is the possibility that may meet us on the other side. And a lot of times when we talk about this notion of mindset, we talk about the difference between Dr. Carol Dweck's work, fixed mindset, growth mindset, and the fixed mindset that really believes that change, I am the way that I am, things are the way that they are, women are what they are, men are what they are, this race is this, like these fixed ways of seeing. And then there's the growth mindset, which is about that anything is possible, right? Anything can emerge, anything can grow and evolve, and that we are adaptive and that we are iterative and things are always changing. I actually love to stretch that concept of the growth mindset and talk about the transformation mindset, which is to me what is essential for us to be able to go through that portal and come and meet whatever meets us on the other side with the belief and the commitment that whatever meets us, we are willing and capable of transforming it into something greater. And so to me, the mindset is that of transformation, to see ourselves as transformers, and also to know that in any given moment, between one human and another human, or one human and anything, that there is the possibility of transformation. And so the transformation mindset to me is what is essential, because when you have that mindset, you go through that portal with a sense of confidence, with a sense of commitment, and whatever meets you, you're willing to engage it fully.
I love that, the transformation mindset. And it's so true, right? We need to be open to what's coming because we don't know what's coming. And I think that's maybe as I think about the future right now, from where I sit, from what I can see, and, it's limited because it's limited by my own knowledge. It's limited by my own access. It's limited by those I come into contact with. So I only have a piece of the puzzle, if you will. And what I see, because for many of us, we are dealing with lots of different inputs. And so being transformational, having a transformational mindset can be challenging because where we are, the set point of where we are feels maybe chaotic. And so, when if we're trying to have that transformational mindset, how do we do that amidst chaotic times, because that's where, I feel like nothing right now is solid. Everything is in a state of fluidity, which is actually beautiful in some ways, but also not comfortable. And so what are your thoughts on that? Like when we are in chaos, when the world is in midst of transformation and we have a transformational mindset, what can we do? How can we ground that and find a place for us to actually do something?
I think the biggest gift that I have found for myself, and that when I'm working, whether it's with leaders or organizations or teams, that I find is the biggest gift is there has to be a bit of separation between you and what you feel that you are amidst or mired in. And very often when we are amidst chaos, we begin to believe more in the chaos and we believe in our own capacities. And so once you start to begin to believe in your capacities and you accept the chaos, that it can be what it is in this moment, and it is always able to transform in the moment, but it's about separation between me and the chaos, and just enough for me to come back to the awareness and the belief that I can actually ask a question. I can pull in a resource. I can find someone. I can reach out in order to solve this solution. And I can actually create a pathway that allows for me to address the chaos in this moment and begin to enter into that transformative process, that exponential transformation process, right? And so I think the biggest challenge that most people face is that they begin to believe that the chaos is all that is and all that will be. That's the other component. It's not all that you are, and it is not all that will be. When we think of chaos, we tend to think of it in this fixed awareness and that it is perennial. I'm always going to be in this. This is always going to be a mess. And when we extend it, our world is always going to be a hot mess. It's not. And what's going to allow us to understand that this world is not always going to be like this is the belief in our ability to play a role in transforming it. And so to me, that's the fundamental foundational point.
That is honestly, that is such an important thing. And I think you're just leading me into where I think I need to kind of even think about it a little bit more, which is, when we're in that place of chaos and it feels like this is all there's going to be, but that's not true. So what can we hold that is true? And, for me, as I think about the last 5 years of my business as an example, we've gone through many changes in those 5 years, and the way the business looked 5 years ago is very different than the way it looks today. Talk Boutique has grown and changed, and rightly so, because we all grow and change, whether we're real businesses, whether we're humans. Well, we're all humans, of course. But whether we're in that human experience or whether we're in the experience of humanity expressed through business or through some other lens. But the thing that I would say that stays the same, and I think this is really important, is the place you're trying to get to. And so, when I remember back when I started Talk Boutique, the vision that I had for us was to really be able to impact the social narrative, you know, to create a positive view of our future. Because what I could see was we had, you know, news channels, we had discourse that was taking us into a place of negativity. And I didn't believe it, because I worked with people like you and other thinkers who show me such a positive, beautiful future. And so I started Talk Boutique to create a future that had a social narrative around positivity. And so that hasn't changed. And my path has to kind of keep that. So that was my vision. And it takes me to, you know, the future of the landscape by Hardin Tibbs, because I think that's a piece of it. So I would love for you to help us to understand that concept of, you know, in the chaotic world, let's have that piece that gives us a North Star so that we can see the future as a landscape.
You know, that element of the North Star, or what some would call the massive transformative purpose, what I love to call the higher dream, is the orienting factor that we, whether it's an individual, you are journeying to get to your destination, or you're part of an organization, or you're leading an organization or leading a venture, and that is the orienting factor. The challenge is that most people will look at that star, look at that massive transformative purpose without realizing that you have to embody it. So it's there, but it also has to come inside of you so that then you can be galvanized, activated to make the changes in reality in order to reach that destination. And sometimes you will reach it and find a new one, or you will reach it and you'll realize, you know what, there's something, another, or, you know, star that I want to orient myself to. But an exercise that I always do when I'm kind of leading transformative processes is I have people visualize that North Star, you know, connect that massive transformative purpose, the higher dream, and then imagine as if it is moving towards you and coming inside of you. And what happens, without a doubt, is when people actually feel what it's like to embody purpose, it transforms your presence. And then you can pitch differently, you can communicate differently, you behave differently, the organization shifts. And so I'm just giving that insight into, just because you have one doesn't mean you're actually going to engage in the way that you need to engage in order to meet that desired destination. And what does that mean, engage and behave? When we think about Hardin Tibbs' work, right, he talks about the self, right, which I call you yourself as the agent of transformation, with all your local awareness, the journey you've been on up until this point. And you look out in front of you, the model that he speaks about, and there is this chessboard, and that is the nature of the behavior. So you have the vision of Talk Boutique. Here you are, you have this positive vision, but then now you have to navigate the chessboard. Every single one of us have our own chessboard, and we also have a collective chessboard right now. So as it relates to climate change, as it relates to, you know, to diversity, equity, inclusion, all of the big challenges and invitations that we have right now, each of us are going to have to navigate the chessboard. How do we play? How do we show up on what we call the field of action?
So
And
if I,
depending, go ahead, yes.
yeah, so I was going to say, so if I understand that correctly, you know, so, okay, so I've got my MVP, I'm embodying it, but you have yours and someone else has theirs, and we're all on the same chessboard, really, right? And so how do we figure out how to interact so that we're all guiding towards our own MVPs? Because at the end of the day, that those MVPs are what are guiding us forward.
Yeah, and then there's, you know, the MVP, and then there's the MTP, which are all parts. Some people are guided more by the MVP, some people are MTP. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of we all have our own, but I also believe that there is a collective one.
Right.
And that is how we navigate. So if we are playing the same game, which is a world that works for all, then how we show up on that field of action is different. How we make decisions is different. Here's an example. Most recently, I was inspired by a story of transformative change in a place called Newburgh, New York, that I used to support. And there was a new art piece went up in a community. And it was an image of what they were calling a Black femme, but it was painted by a white male from out of town. And people were kind of up in arms, and some people loved it, but they were like, why wasn't someone from the local community brought forth to paint that image? Or why wasn't there some level of community engagement? And there was one woman who was, presenting as a white woman who spoke about it. Now, when she spoke about it, she was showing up as an authentic ally to say, wait a minute, let me voice this because I believe in a world that works for all. And so when you have that awareness of raising your voice or being in the field of action and asking questions, regardless of what skin, what gender, etc., you're going to show up differently than if I'm just here for myself, my own aims, my own company. And so that's what I mean. We have our own chessboard, and then there's this larger chessboard, which is the collective field of action that we individually and collectively and all of our creations, our businesses, etc., have to and are invited to play a game together in order to reach the higher dream, if we so believe and so choose.
That almost brings us right back to mindsets, right? Because that bigger chessboard, that bigger, purpose is almost like we almost have to come into it with the mindset that says, I believe that we're all working towards the same end. I believe that, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that the reason your purpose for doing this was towards that end. And so with that in mind, I may question the way in which you've done it or why, but I'm going to question it from a place of, I know that you had the best reason for doing that. I'm looking to understand, not to challenge. And that's a different mindset, right? We've grown up in this place of like, let's challenge everything.
As and you see it.
Yeah.
And you see that challenge on, Facebook threads, here's the thing, what I love about what you just brought up is that actually you're speaking about one of the key results and the key, I guess, the key remits when we talk about reinventing the future, we're also talking about reinventing relational dynamics. Mm-hmm. So reinventing the future a new future cannot arise without the transformation of relational fields, the way in which you and I relate to one another. The questions I'm holding and the assumptions I'm holding about you and what you're holding about me impacts what we can collectively co-create.
Right.
And that is about mindset, and that is about assumption, and that is also about the models of behavior that also have to be transformed.
You just remind, when I'm teaching, obviously we do a lot of training for people who are moving into that thought leadership role. And one of the things that we teach is something we call status. And I know you've gone through some of our training, so you probably are familiar with this, but you just reminded me of some of the teaching that we give. We call it the personal status triangle. And status, just to be clear, it has nothing to do with your socioeconomic standpoint. What we're talking about in this case is the status that you show up with on a stage. How do you see yourself? And it's really about three things. It's how do I perceive myself? So that's one side of the triangle. What is my perception of me? The second side of the triangle is how does my audience perceive me? And that's out of your hands, maybe. So I'll come back to that. The third side of the triangle is what is my perception of how the audience perceives me. Now, I can control how I perceive me, and I actually can control what my perception of how the audience perceives me. And when I control those two things, I actually control how the audience perceives me. Because what I've done is I've taken full agency over myself as a sovereign being. And what I've done is I've said, I see myself in this way. And therefore, others can see me in that. And what you were just describing through the lens of mindset is exactly that. I can, by having an open mindset and by believing that everybody is coming forward with the best possible intent, or for the most part, unless there's a reason why I'm going to have a different opinion of that, then what I'm doing is I'm controlling not just my perception of me, but my perception of how others are showing up in my experience. And because So thoughts on that, Ozioma? Sorry, I think I just cut out there. I hope you heard all of that.
I heard most of it. There was a little bit of cutout, but I'll speak about agency because I think that that is, you know, the subtext of what we've been speaking about for this entire session, which is about, you know, individual and collective agency and the belief that, yes, the perceptions I'm holding about myself, about you, about what's happening will impact the way in which I show up. And the more that I can actually attune myself to a certain higher order awareness and higher order behavior, that will transform the trajectory of where I am headed and those who we're aligning, how we show up and how we navigate. And to your initial remarks about the state of our world right now and how we are at a point where everything has transformed. The world we lived in, I always, I found an old journal from 2019, on my last trip to the United States of America, and I was aware of that the woman writing that in that journal and and the world she was living in and the world we are currently living in is completely different.
Yeah.
And how we show up, in terms of the work that I've been doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, the work I've been doing with sustainability, and the opportunity to impact these big shifting spheres that are just part of this larger conversation during these special times, what I love to call these special times that we're in. And it is all about agency and really rising up and believing in your capacities. And even if you don't believe in them, doing what you can to connect and to enhance them for a greater purpose. Because sometimes when I talk about confidence or capacities, there are people who are listening to me right now who may not be there yet. And it's not about you being there yet. It's about you being committed to being where you need to be in order to make the contribution that you are meant to make. Because believing in it is not always the prerequisite for being able to make a difference. And I want to remind people of that. Because sometimes the belief will be strong and sometimes it will wane, but the commitment should not waver.
I love that. And I'm reminded of, the concept of like the question that I often, ask myself. And as you talk about, the woman who wrote the journal in 2019 is not the woman who's sitting in front of me right now. Of course not, because that woman has gone through her own transformation. Ozioma today is different from Ozioma in 2019, as is Andrea today, versus Andrea in 2019. So, when we think about that, as I sit where I am today in this moment, and for you as well, it's what are we doing today to set up our future selves for success? I think that's actually the biggest question. How are we? What are the measures we're putting in place? And I see a question here, and I know we're almost out of time, so I'll ask it, and then we'll have to wrap up. Is about, can we provide examples on how our relationships are changing? And I do, to me, this was sort of playing into that future self conversation, because it's like, what am I doing today to prepare myself for who I'm going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, to prepare my business for that, to prepare. So looking at that through the lens of relationships, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a very powerful question because I think the times that we are in the times are truly inviting us to look at the role that we play with the whole. And there we engage relationships. And so when I speak specifically, I look and think about how in an instant, what a hug means versus what it meant before.
Yeah. Oh God, now that
You
just
know what
made
I
me,
mean?
yes, yes.
And so if we look at that specifically in terms of our ability to give a hug and receive a hug against this context of what does this person have? Oh my God, what's going to be the risk to me? But what's interesting is even before Corona, many of us had that same type of dynamic with others. Is this person out to get me? Are they out to use me? What do I have to get? What do I have to gain? And all these questions about relationships. And so to me, I think the biggest transformation is just to hold positive intent and to be that person who is willing to be of service
Mm.
in relational dynamics and in moments of conflict specifically. So when we talk about relationships, we're also talking about it especially with social media, we're seeing a lot of conflict. A lot of conflict is emerging out of nowhere. And it pops off here, it pops off there. And so there's also this invitation to have presence of mind in how you engage everything. What you're posting on social media, who you are responding to, how you are responding, what conversations you're choosing to engage in. And then there's the relationship of who do I want to build with?
Mm.
Who are the partners that I want to collaborate with to support that new society that is actually being built right now? And so when we talk about relationships, the biggest word I would say there is intentionality. Being intentional with relationships, thinking about relationships from a regenerative perspective. So giving and getting and making sure that in every instance, as much as possible, that you are creating relationships that are operating off of wholeness. And to me, those intentionality, regenerativity, all those two aspects of relationships, I think are key components that are essential to be fostered during these times.
Mm. Wow, so much there. So as I think about this conversation, in the last 30 minutes, we have traversed a lot. The reality is I think we can all agree we are capable of much more than we believe we are. When we have a goal, when we have that massive transformative purpose, and purpose, I think, is the aligning thought. And when we combine purpose with mindset, a mindset that says we are open to what could be, we are open to see where things could take us. And when we are intentional on purpose, intentional and on purpose, what we are doing is we're co-creating a future. We're co-creating a future that has a lot of possibilities for each one of us to meet the individual purposes that we are all on. This has been a big conversation. I think it will take me a couple of days to digest this one.
It has been a very big conversation. It spanned a lot of different topic areas and also a lot of really important levels. So the one thing I want to invite those people who are listening to this now and will be listening to this in the future is pay attention to the levels at which you are operating. Because most conversations will only hit one level of we're only speaking to this particular swath of society, or we're only talking about this particular issue. But we're at a point right now where that multi-dimensional and multi-layered approach is required. So even if in the way that we engaged right now, we added multiple layers to explore different lenses and the conversation expanded. And so I invite everyone who's listening right now to also think about when you find yourself in a conversation that feels very myopic or feels very one level, invite a different level in and see how it transforms everything.
I love that. Oh my God, I have enjoyed every moment of this conversation. And I know our guests have as well. But unfortunately, this does bring us to the end of today's conversation. So I want to first of all thank you, Ozioma, for an amazing conversation that has traversed so much. We are incredibly grateful for all you contribute, not only to this community, but to the world at large. And World Dream Day is a real gift to this world. So thank you.
You know, it's interesting when you said 7.4 million, it's actually 74 million.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's actually 74 million. And so I was like, okay, but I'm like, maybe I should say something about it just so people can understand, like, from this day that was just an inkling, it's really become something that, around the world, it just continues to grow. I just saw like Jeep created a campaign last year for World Dream Day, Disney. And so it's amazing to see that space of, companies doing it, but then also schools, like a school in India that created every single year, 9th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 5th grade, all World Dream Day. And it's just amazing to see. And the reason why I mentioned that is because that's the level at which we want to operate, ground level as well as other levels, in order to create the change.
And that's September 25th, right?
September 25th is World
Okay,
Dream.
mark it in your calendars. All right, everyone, thank you for staying. Thank you for joining us. Next week, join us for another sense-making conversation with Louisa Jewell, where she and I will go deep into looking at our mental health and how we can shift how we see ourselves. So have an amazing rest of your day. Think about all of what we talked about today. This will be up on our Facebook page as well as available on our YouTube channel. I would suggest you go back and listen to it again, because I know I'm going to. There was so much talked about here. I know I didn't process it all. So enjoy, and we will see you again soon.